Okay, so I recently put out a video about a Zig Zap Postgres tutorial sort of example, code walkthrough type thing, and I had some complaints about Zap. I feel like I was pretty transparent about them in that video, so if you are curious about them in more detail, you should check it out. However, most of my research into HTTP libraries in Zig were pointing me towards Zap. I was seeing a lot of things from the community. A lot of my Google searches were just pointing me towards Zap more so than anything else. I found another library called Zinc that was pretty interesting to me. Let me pull that up. But Zinc was missing some things, specifically things like path parameters. And my perspective at the time was that maybe Zig web frameworks are still, early stages. And I don't know how, but somehow KarlSeguin, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. His HTTP server is really good, and somehow it slipped under my radar completely, which is wild because I ended up using his Postgres library for the Postgres setup. So the original point of that experiment and code walkthrough was to figure out what it looks like to use Postgres in a clean way in an HTTP server with Zig. Um, he's got an example of that on this page somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Postgres. Okay, maybe not here, but in the examples folder, I think he has Postgres. Ah, shit. It's somewhere around here. I saw an example as I was reading through this. But anyways, I thought it would be fun to take a look at this and convert the existing implementation using Zap over to KarlSeguin's HTTP Zig server library framework. I guess library is probably more appropriate at this point. So let's do that. It sounds like fun. So I am going to not spoil other videos. Get into the right directory here. Jeez, it took me a minute. Zig PG. Okay, cool. I'm going to use Zig fetch. We will grab this. Hopefully this is built for Zig 0.13.0. I'm not too positive, but we'll find out pretty quickly if not. Okay, well, I'll stick with VS Code for this. People seem to find this easier to follow and read, so we'll just stick with that. So we'll get to keep a lot of this. We can set a custom not found handler. I'm pretty sure it ships with one. I'd rather not write one if it ships with one. So basically, we'll keep all of the Postgres stuff that we have, the allocator setup that we have, our little migration that we have. And we're just going to go ahead and start by removing all of the Zap stuff. So we've got this Zap piece here. We have this user controller. We don't really need the controller. So part of the goal of the controller was to not have to pass the pool around to all of the handler functions. So I needed a way to essentially make the pool available to the handlers, which puts me in a really weird spot with endpoints and field parent pointer. And again, if you want to learn more about that, you should watch the Zig Zap Postgres video because I talk about that in that video. But I didn't like it. Like it set wrong with me. But I really didn't want to have to pass the pool around everything too. So I was trying to figure out a good solution there. And what we get with HTTP.zig just supports it out of the box. So there's an example of using the app and having some state shared in the app and being able to access that. I really wish I could find that Postgres example. Anyways, we can continue migrating this over. So the example here in the README is really good. It's really clean. It's basically everything we need. So we're going to just copy and paste some code. As always, I actually recommend typing this out on your own if you are following along. It helps reinforce the things that you're learning. But for the sake of speed, we will copy and paste some here. We basically want all of this. So I can take everything here for the listener and all of this and should be good to paste over it. So the only thing we don't have is this get user function. So we could point to our controller if we wanted to, but I don't really feel like we have a need for the controller as much anymore if we are using the app state. So let me see if I can find that example here again. Oh yeah, for example, using PG.zig, we can make database connection pool available to each action. That's exactly what I want to do. That's exactly what the point of that controller was. So we can take this approach, and I think that that might be a better option. So they define a struct here called app. We'll do the same thing. So we'll take a struct app. I'm also going to give it an allocator. I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but I would like to not have to pass the allocator around. So we'll point this to a standard mem allocator. And what we want to do is somewhere define our app. So it looks like they're defining it before the server. Oops. So we have our server here. Let's go ahead and define our app. And DB is actually a pool. And allocator is our allocator. Okay. PG pool looks good, looks good. This probably needs to be a reference to a PG pool. Okay, I think that should be fine. I think it's the LSP is having some issues because we blatantly have an error here with this not existing, but once we make that exist, I think we should be good to go. So with that in mind, we don't need a lot of this. I don't really need controllers anymore. I still want these methods. So I'm going to grab these methods because they're more or less everything I need. And what we're going to do is cut those. I don't think I need this user ID from path anymore either, because looking at the examples here, it looks like path params are supported, which is excellent. That is something I've come to expect from frameworks at this point, and it was kind of shocking to see that from what I understood, Zap didn't fully support that yet, and then Zinc, the other alternative I mentioned in the other video, while it seems really, really nice, it also doesn't support path params yet. I filed an issue for that. The author said they're interested in making that happen. So maybe one day, but for now, let's work with what we got. So I'm just going to paste these out here. We get to remove a bunch of stuff, so we can remove this. We still want our user struct. We still want our new user request, but I think we're good to toss this entire controller at this point. So let's toss this. Less code is always good. And let's take a look at what these examples look like. So the get user gets a reference to the app, a request, and a response. So we're going to change our method signature to support that. And one thing I'm really excited about is, again, if you watched the other video, you'd know that we can't have an error union with our return type here. I call that an error union. It might not be the correct term. I probably should figure that out because I feel like I've said it a lot lately. But where we are returning something that could be an error, we can't do that in Zap. So we have to handle the error in this method and then approach that differently. So with HTTP.zig, we can actually have an error in our handler. Okay, so we have our app. We need to import that from somewhere. Honestly, I don't even know if there's much benefit in having this in a separate file at this point. Main.zig is only 40-something lines. Let's make this simpler. Let's take everything and we're just going to paste it in main.zig. We can always break it out into more files later if we would really like to. So we have these. We don't need this user controller. Let's delete it. Keep things simple. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. We don't have a reference to a user controller. We don't need this. And this handler is going to change a fair bit. So maybe what we should do is instead get all of these method signatures correct, and then we start approaching the handlers one at a time. And maybe we start with delete since that is one of our simplest handlers. So we have app and HTTP.zig request, HTTP.zig response. We don't have access to this user controller. We don't have access to this user controller. And we don't have access to this user controller, so we can toss those. We don't have access to self, but what we do have access to is app. App has a pool on it, so we can fix that. App has an allocator, so we can fix that. We need that allocator again. And then we need that allocator again. And then we need that allocator again. In theory, we're good to go. We'll actually build this and see if it works, but it might not be that simple. In fact, it won't be that simple because the signature has changed. I don't know why I said that it would be. So interesting. We'll have to look into these types, and we'll have to do a little bit more with this, but I feel good about this. So we do have access to self here. Why? Okay, there's the first error. So self becomes app because the allocator and the pool are available on the app where they were originally available on the controller. And we can completely forego this now since we don't need it. So let's come back to that one because we'll solve it right down here and it'll be a little more straightforward. Let's take a look. So there is this get user. This has a path param. So what we can do is look at the path param. So they have an example here of them getting the user ID. So we don't need most of this. So we can do something like this instead. User ID. And we should be good to go. Oh, again, no, we're not good to go. Sorry, we need to set some things on the response. So we want to set res, see if there's an example. Res.status, res.body. Really nice and easy. So res.status is equal to, yep, let's do, oh shoot, what did we have this as? Internal server. Okay, so 500. Otherwise, let's do res.status is equal to, what is 204? 204 status code. No content. Okay, yeah, sounds good. Actually seems like the most correct status. We can do the same thing here. So we've got a couple of these that we'll want to replace, right? So anywhere we have res.setStatus, we'll want to change that. So I'm just going to grab all of these. And, oh, so I thought, so we want rec.setStatus. We'll take this one, we'll take this one, we'll take this one, and I think that's all. So we'll change this to res.status is equal to, and then let's go back and clean up the rest of these. So we've got a couple not founds, a couple bad requests. Really it looks like, so that'll be a 400 since that's a bad request. This will be a 500 because that's an internal server error. This will be a 404. This will be a, what was this? Not found? Okay, 404. Okay, so we're setting our status now. Feels pretty good. We don't need this at all. We have an example of getting the user ID. We don't need the path check that we needed in Zap. So things just get a little simpler, which I'm here for. That also means we don't have this case anymore. Is that true? Because we will, if this gets called, we'll always have a path. Okay, yeah, so I think that will be true. So I think we just need this. Self pool becomes app. I thought we fixed that already, but I guess not. App and app. Okay, feeling pretty good. What else do we have? Res.status. This is just res.body. Oh my gosh, let me type correctly. And I don't think we have to try this. I don't think that assigning this can possibly return an error. So I think we're good on the catch there. So we have res.body. We should have another one. We have get user and then we have get users. So this will be res.body is equal to s. Feel pretty good about that. Looks like we have a couple errors up here. Oh yeah, user controller is not used. It also doesn't exist anymore, so there's that. And then we need to wire up the app handler. So let's see how this is actually used here. So we have try HTTP.zig server init. So let's find where we're initializing that server right here. And we're sending void. We want to send the app, right? So, oh, this looks like a comp time type. So actually what we want is a reference to the app type. And then, oh, sorry, interesting. Okay, yeah, we'll try it out. And then we need a reference to the app over after the port. So we're in the port, and this will be app. Let's give that a go. So we have our server, we have our router. So we need to actually add these methods to our router. So probably the simplest way to do that would just be /users here, and we want to call get users. And I'm just going to take this and we're going to paste this a couple of times. So we have get user, get users /ID. Let me make sure that I did call that ID down here. I did. Feel pretty good about that. What else? We need a post for users and a delete for users. We don't support patch or put or options, so I feel like we're pretty good with those. So this will be get user. This will be save user. And this will be delete user. We've made a ton of changes and we haven't actually ran Zig build in a minute, so I'm going to let the LSP catch up. Sometimes it gets a little bit behind, example. And once it catches up, if we're free of red squiggles, we will run a Zig build and just see what we get. So Zig build. Okay, cool. Several things that we need to take care of. Oh, interesting. This looks like it's just build related. I am curious if there is a O13. There is an O13 branch. So we need to grab the O13 branch instead. Yep. Okay, cool. So let's do that. I think that might be our issue. Overwriting existing dependency. Yep, that's fine with me. Hit this with Zig build. It's a good sign. Cool. Yeah, these are my errors. These are things I can fix, not so much dependency issues. So this user controller import doesn't exist, so let's toss that. What else? On 31, we're expecting a pointer to a pool, and we have a pointer to a pointer on 31. So what we get back is, oh yeah, it is a pointer to a pool. Okay, cool. So let's give this a run. No module with HTTP.zig available in this route. Oh, we need to add the dependency to our build step. We added it to our zigzon, but we need to add it to our build zig. So I'm just going to overwrite the zap piece since we're not zapping anymore and we are HTTP.zigging. We'll use that, give this a build, and we'll see how this shakes out. Looks like we have an issue. Expected 0 arguments, found 1. Looks like pub function server. Interesting. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, server app. Interesting. Server.router. Okay, so it looks like the API for the O13 Zig version and the nightlies has changed a fair bit. So since we're using the O13 version now, we just need to make sure that our API matches what we would expect. So let's take a look at this router example. So they have increment. It gets a global request response. I'm curious what I'm doing wrong. Oh, the router get doesn't have this additional parameter. So let's remove that. Okay, should be good. Remove that one, should be good. Remove that, and should be good. Let's give this another build and see how it shakes out. Okay, so no field named pool. Let's just, for simplicity's sake, we called this DB on the app. We're just going to rename it to pool. It'll be a small change that way. DB is probably a better name for it. Pool's not exactly obvious what it is. Is it a thread pool? Is it a pool of connections for a database? A Redis pool? Maybe not the best name, but we'll just keep it with what we have. We have another request.body, request.path. Those aren't used anymore because that's a zapism, so we don't need this anymore. So we'll gut this if and replace it right here. And then we have a request body. Let's take a look at getting the request body because that's one thing I'm a little uncertain about. So we have our request. The body of the request, if any, can be accessed by rec.body. Okay, cool. This actually might be pretty similar to what we have because we want a slice of U8s. So I think we're good with that one. Let's just see if there's any more request.bodies. There's not. And any more request.paths. There's not. Okay. Give this another build. Unused function parameter. We're getting there. Main 59. Yeah, I guess we don't use the request for get users because we don't need to introspect the request at all. I don't do any pagination. If you were to do pagination, you would probably want to pull that from the request. So that might not be... oh my gosh, it built. Let's give this zig build run. But if you were to do pagination, you'd obviously want to read that from the request, like the limit, the offset, the page, whatever. Error, connection refused. Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. I need to run Docker. Let this boot up. And okay, should be good. I'm just going to hop over here and do a nice Docker run with Postgres for Zap user. So it looks like we're good to go. Give this a big zig build run. Seems promising. I don't think we log anything. I guess that's one thing that we did do in the Zap implementation that we're not doing in the HTTP.zig implementation is logging the port that we're running on. And I actually don't know what we have it set to. So let's see if we can find out. 5882. I'm just going to swap this over to 3000 so our test cases still run and we don't have to change them. Give this another zig build run. One more just to be safe. Okay, cool. So with that in mind, we should be able to go to localhost 3000. We hit a not found. It means our server's running. I feel pretty good about that. No indication in the console. That's okay. Let's go back to our test case here. So we have these tests that are just in an HTTP file. So let's run a couple of these. So the first thing we're going to do is send a request for Brad. We have a 200. We're going to get all the items. Looks like we need to do something to the string before we actually send that on the body. Same, yeah, okay, we're seeing an issue there. Let's see if our delete works like we would expect, though. We got a not found for the delete. Okay, so we have a couple issues. Let's sort through those. Oh, as a fun aside, it looks like there's actually a method for JSON parsing on the body, which looks way nicer than what I'm doing down here with all of this. So that might be something we look at too. But for now, let's get what we have working. So we have a string here. We are setting the body. Oh, interesting. Okay, so the simplest way to set a body is to use res.body to a const u8. However, the provided value must remain valid until the body is written, which happens outside of your application code. First hang up with HTTP.zig that I've found. That's fine. You can manage this with like an arena, but yeah. Okay, therefore res.body can be safely used with constant strings. It can also be used with content created with res.arena. Okay, cool. There's an arena on the res. So explained in the next section. You can use res.arena allocator to create dynamic content. Interesting. So there's an arena that is associated. Well, I don't want to own this, right? Empties the array list. So you can use res.arena allocator to create dynamic content. Standard format, a lock print, a res.arena. Okay, so there's probably a couple different ways to handle this. This is slightly overkill. There's definitely a cleaner way to do this, but we're just going to copy the example that they have here. And the reason I say this is overkill is because we're actually not going to format anything. We're just going to use an existing arg so that it gets cloned. So we'll use S here, and we're just going to plop S into the format so that it gets cloned. You might be able to just mem copy this. There are probably some other avenues. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, and I want to be mindful of your time. So I'm just going to add a to-do here. Find the best way to handle this. And then anywhere else we have a body, we'll basically need to do the same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and I think I should just be able to paste it as is. So we have res.body right here, so let's give that a shot. And I think that's the only one that we use the body on. That looks to be correct. Okay, with that in mind, let's give this another run and see how things shape out. So if we do a git, hey, look, perfect. Okay, so that was the issue. We were freeing the memory before we were actually writing it. So that totally makes sense. Looks like we maybe still have the same issue here for base users once. That will be get user. Res.body. This should be good. I'm curious if maybe... Okay, yep. It didn't... I had executed it too quickly and it didn't pick up on that change, I'm guessing. So if we were to run this again... Yep. Okay, cool. That is a weird thing that I've ran into. It seems like the Zig language server is like doing some stuff behind the scenes and doing a lot with like the Zig cache. And sometimes it takes a second for the Zig cache to catch up. So if you make a change and you immediately kick over and do Zig build run, there's a chance that your change may not have been a part of that compilation. So you might have to do it again. Okay, so with that in mind, we're getting a not found here. So we have an error in the delete, but we're really close to having this one-to-one with the Zap implementation, and we are just moving right through it. So let's see what we're doing differently with the delete. So we are deleting where the user ID... I think I know what our issue is. So if we look up here, yeah, okay, perfect. Small issue, we didn't have the path param. So now that we have the path param, I'm going to let this stop, let the LSP catch up. And now that the LSP is caught up, Zig build run, hit this again, hit delete, 204, that's what we wanted to see. Get all users, we have an empty list. Let's hit this one more time. So we're adding Brad, we're going to add Jacob again. We're going to get all users. We're going to see 2, 3. That makes sense because we had one. One was deleted. In Postgres, it's set to serial, so it's going to auto increment. Totally makes sense, at least to me. We're going to grab ID 3. We just want to see Jacob. We got it. We just want to delete Jacob. Now, if we go back and get all of our users, we just see Brad. Okay, so again, just circling back to one last thing. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the best way to handle this is, the cleanest way. If you want to copy something from one allocator to another, I'm sure there's a better option. And maybe the approach here is not to own slicing it. Is there just a to slice? Slice me. No, there's not. Okay, so there's definitely a better way to handle this. This is what I'm uncertain about. So if you were to copy this pattern and kind of approach this, you may want to maybe take a different approach with this. I think also one thing I really want to look at is now that we have this working, I really want to look at the way that the JSON stuff works. So we have body. This is what I want, request JSON user. So if I can just remove all this parsing crap, I am so here for that. Request JSON new user request. See if it works. Does it update our type? Maybe. What is body? Take your time. Unknown. Okay. Not my favorite. Try request. Oh, we need to try it. New user request. Perfect. Love that. Okay, so we can remove this parsing. We can remove maybe user. We don't need maybe user anymore. This is going to be allocated in the arena, so we don't have to deinitialize it. It'll take care of that. It's an assumption. I should clarify that arena is on the request. So my assumption is that the arena will be deallocated when the request completes. So definitely an assumption, but man, this handler is so much smaller. So let me make sure this works before we get too excited about it. Not off to a good start. No field named value instruct main user new user request. Oh, do we not need? Oh, it just gives me the struct. We don't have the, so when you parse it, you have like a container that has an arena on it, and you have to dig into the value. So it would be like item.value.name or body.value.name, but here it looks like just body.name. Perfect. Give this another build. Excellent. Feeling pretty good about this. This is way more my speed than what I was seeing with Zap. So I'm going to do another person. Most of my friends are named Jake, so I probably shouldn't do another Jacob, but I'm kind of at a loss for names. Let's go with Matt. So we've added a Matt, and we have retrieved a Matt. Man, that is so nice. This request JSON being built in is so much nicer than what we were doing with Zap. That makes me very, very happy. I think the last thing I'm kind of curious about is I've got this pattern right here that is basically formatting the output. So I'm curious if there is something on the response that I can use to take some of this pain away. So for example, I'm creating a string, I'm creating an array list. Oh, that is not the correct name. Oh no, wait, it is. Sorry, it's an array list of U8. So it will ultimately be a string. I'm owning the user slice, deferring, freeing that, doing a JSON stringify to that string. So I'm writing that to that string, and then I'm converting that to an own slice, and then I am deferring, freeing that, and then the stuff that we just added. It's a lot. So I'm curious if there's anything on the yes. Res JSON function will set the content type to HTTP. Oh, and it sets the content type for us. That's nice. I'm not doing that. Probably should be. And serialize the provided value using standard JSON stringify. The second argument to the function is the standard JSON stringify options to pass to the stringify function. The second option to the JSON function is the standard JSON stringify options to pass to the okay, that makes sense. So you can provide it options that get passed to JSON stringify, which are these options right here. In my case, I don't need any of those. So this might be as simple as saying res.json users slice, and then we can just pass empty objects there. And in theory, we don't need any of this, which means we don't need the string as well. I'm just going to comment that out for now. Let's make sure this actually works before we go too gung-ho in the refactoring. Error union is ignored. Let's just give this a try. I'm assuming that's where my error union comes from, right? Yes, it does. So we'll just give this a try for now. You might want to handle that more carefully, but I'm happy with a try for this. Okay, we are booking it through this. This feels good. What was this? This was get user. So as long as we're able to get all items, oh, beautiful. Application, JSON, content length, it is setting it all for us. This is so much better than me doing it manually, and it's doing so much more for us. I am thrilled. So we have the same, I was going to say junk down here. I don't want to discredit my hard work from earlier. It's not junk. But it's not it's not what I want. So let's take this example here and do the exact same thing. So I don't have a user slice. I just have a wait, right? I don't need this string. Let's start here. We don't need this. I just need user. So we can just pass in user here. We can remove this. We can remove these. Man, that is so much cleaner. Hit this with a zig build run. Give this a shot. Oh my gosh, what method did we just change? Get user. Okay, cool. So get user, get a specific item. We don't have, let me just make sure I get a 404. Okay, good. We do get a 404. Perfect. Application JSON, content length 22. There's the JSON blob. It's even pretty formatted for us because that's what this extension does if it detects that it's JSON. Thrilled. This also worth mentioning. This is 107 lines of Zig for this entire project. Outside of your your Zig build and your Zon file. This feels great. This feels so much better than the Zap implementation. And don't get me wrong, I'm still thoroughly impressed with Zap, but the rough edges that I ran into are just not the trade-offs that I'm willing to make. As someone who's, I would argue, getting comfortable with Zig, but still learning a lot, the lack of help and rough edges that I ran into with Zap, and by lack of help, I don't mean the community. The community seems great, and the people I've talked to in that community were helpful, but there's like a loss of type safety that just really caused issues for me. I was running into seg faults and it wasn't clear where they were, and it wasn't clear if it was my code or something else, and it was a mess. This seems so much cleaner. It's all Zig all the way down, which is great. And yeah, I really am digging this. I know that the pattern is different, so you could do a similar pattern like this in Zap instead of the endpoint and controller type thing that I was doing. But my understanding was that with Zap, you don't have verbs on the router to dispatch on. The router like handles a request. So what I ended up doing with that controller approach was that I essentially had a dispatch function that originally dispatched to everything, and then I moved it to endpoints, and then it was only dispatching on the two gets. But I had a single route that was basically handling all of the verbs that I supported for that path, and it felt clunky. This does not. This feels great. This feels really nice. My takeaway from this, at the end of my Zap video, I mentioned that I don't see myself doing more APIs with Zap anytime soon, and I was worried that it might mean that I'm not doing more APIs with Zig anytime soon. That is not true. Totally not true. This is so much nicer, and this is exactly what I am looking for in an API, or in in the interface that I'm working with to build APIs. The one thing I will mention that I do, it's not a knock on this. This is fine. The interface is great. The request response is really good, and I'm really impressed with what KarlSeguin put together. But I will mention just one more time Zinc, because I have a mix of programming languages in my background before Zig, Go being the most relevant recently, and arguably one of my strongest languages. And this Zinc framework is very similar to Go's standard web server type stuff that's built into the standard library, and then also the pattern that is generally adopted when people build new options in Go or build on top of that in Go. It looks very familiar. It looks very nice. But I'm also, again, really impressed with this HTTP.zig. So pretty thrilled to see where this goes. I did talk to Karl very briefly on his Postgres. Shoot, let's see if I can find it. Oh, it's right there. I created an issue, and we had a very brief conversation. But the key thing here was actually exactly what we ran into earlier with HTTP. I assumed wrongfully that the library was built for 0.13.0, which is what I'm running, and not nightly. And it just wasn't obvious to me that this was built for 0.13.0. The reason I realized it so quickly with HTTP.zig was because I ran into this with PG.zig, and I opened this issue trying to figure out what it was. And Karl was kind enough to tell me that there's a Zig 0.13 branch, and he uses the exact same pattern for HTTP.zig. So that's what we swapped to and pulled in. However, he's planning to clean this up, so I think that'll be great. So when 0.14 comes out, master is going to be pinned to 0.14, and then there will be a dev branch to track Zig's master, which seems so nice. So, yeah, Karl, if by some chance you watch this, thank you. This entire video is using your libraries outside of the standard library in Zig itself. So I really appreciate what you did. This is gorgeous. I am really enjoying this style of approach for this project. And a lot of it goes to you. So thank you, Karl. Yeah, so what are your thoughts? If you watched the Zap video, how does this compare to Zap from your expectations? Whether you've built something with Zap or maybe you've just seen what I've built. Have you used Zinc? There's another one that actually looks kind of fun called ZZZ. I don't know why I thought that was going to give me the Zig library. But yeah, ZZZ right here, framework for writing performant, reliable network services. Beautiful graphic. I love it. And yeah, some information about it here. I was considering this as well, but then I saw that HTTP was built by Karl, and I'm also using his Postgres library, so I figured it would be fun to use both of those. HTTP.zig is listed right here in terms of performance. It is apparently not as good in terms of performance on requests per second as ZZZ. But also, truth be told, the fact that there are 3 ZZZ options seem like a little bit of complexity that I didn't want to sort through. And that's also part of the reason I went with HTTP.zig over ZZZ. I have to figure out, do I want to use ZZZ with BusyLoop, ZZZ with epoll, or ZZZ with IO uring? And wasn't really wanting to make that decision right now. I'm trying to wrap up this video. I keep ranting. I will stop. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, hit that bell so you get notified of new Zig videos. They are coming out left and right, and I don't want you to miss any of them. I love talking with you all in the comments about them, and I love hearing your thoughts. So help me, help you, help me, I think. And yeah, besides that, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and have a great day.